Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this awaited webinar of our series. It's, of course, a topic that I think needs no introduction. It's been the talk of town, and I'm sure it's something all of you have also heard. So today we will try and decode what is the Great Resignation, what are the various implications, and of course, how can we as leaders and as HR prevent it or mitigate it in many ways. I am your host, Akshat Shah, and this is the fourth of our ongoing webinar series. In case this is the first time you are attending one of our webinars, the format that we usually follow is that we will have a presentation for about 20 to 30 minutes, and we will follow that up with some Q&A from the audience. So as we go along the session, please feel free to keep putting in your questions on the Q&A tab. And towards the end, we will do our best to try and answer each and every one of them, if not most. So with that, we will get started with today's topic, that is the Great Resignation. This phenomenon is, of course, very, very widely present in the United States, and that is where it really started, and a lot of data around this started getting reported. But we are now seeing effects of this not just in India, but in various other geographies as well. And in many of our conversations with our partner organizations at Great Place to Work Institute, we are seeing that this is a challenge. So it's very real, and as we speak, this is happening. Some industries more than the others, where suddenly it seems for a certain segment of employees, the attrition number seems to have gone up. And while, of course, everybody has theories and some things that they've heard around why this is happening, we will try and explore this a little further today to get to the root of the matter. Before we do that, let's understand what is possibly the extent of this phenomenon. So as per research, there's about 54% of employees that have considered leaving their current employment, and not just to move to a peer or a competitor, but also looking at moving across industries and across geographies. So ever since the recession and the post-recession period, this is the other time that we are now seeing this shift happen, where employees are reevaluating which industry or where they want to physically be based as well. And I'm sure many of you have heard of people moving out of big cities to either the countryside or to tier 2, tier 3 locations, just to have a different sort of a lifestyle. So that's been one increasing trend that we are seeing. We've also seen that there are about 51% of adults that want to actually go to an industry or explore something where they have either no or very, very minimal experience. So when we talk about reevaluating priorities, people are also looking at what they can explore and what actually might excite them. And we're also moving into a world where experience in that particular domain is not as important as it used to be, where even organizations and employers are looking for a lot of fresh outside in perspective. And that has made people feel confident that they can explore opportunities, even in industries and even in avenues that they may not have a lot of prior experience in. And 68% actually wanted to switch industries, irrespective of whether they had any experience there or not. So this is definitely a widespread sort of an issue. It's not isolated, it's not a certain pocket. But of course, there's a certain demographic which seems to be at the forefront of this phenomenon. What we have seen is that it's the age group which is typically people that are in the middle of their career, around the ages of 30 to 45. That is where this trend is being experienced the highest. A lot of them also being working parents, and as a result of the pandemic, as a result of work from home and spending more time with loved ones, that has made them reevaluate priorities. We don't see this happening as much in, let's say, lower tenured or very high tenured folks. But this is that particular age group where we are seeing this happen the most. So then it brings the question to why, what is the reason why this is happening? And not not a lot of this might come as a surprise because it's something we all would have witnessed. But there are questions saying, is it, and a lot of you mentioned this in your comments while registering, that is it just for money? Because now there are suddenly offers that people seem to be getting, which are much higher than what they're getting. So is it just that that is driving this, or is it burnout? Is it any sort of other factors that are playing into question? So we've looked at what are some of the more popular reasons of why people are leaving jobs or are looking to leave jobs and switch careers. And here are a few of them that we have, of course, discovered. The first one, and one that has been very obvious and something we've been hearing across, and I've spoken about this in some of my previous webinars as well. The first one is aspects around well-being and burnout, where a lot of employees are experiencing concerns related to mental health and well-being, and at the same time work-life balance. Because with the pandemic, uh, work from home wasn't what actually happened, it was living at work as a phenomenon, and the lines between professional and personal time have been blurred, as all of us know. Along with that, increasing pressure to ensure business sustains and continues has resulted in a lot of fatigue and a lot of burnout for employees. This was prevalent earlier as well, but around this time, because we've gone digital and the market has also opened up with opportunities, people are now saying that they want to prioritize this over other aspects, and that is why this is happening. We've also seen that employee experience dissatisfaction with the work that an individual does has also driven them to take this decision. Now, I know what many of you are thinking, that why this would have been the case earlier as well. But now people have reevaluated why they're doing what they're doing, and is it something that they're deriving a lot of joy from. And a lot of organizations today, as part of their talent attraction strategy, are focusing on a very unique value proposition that they offer, which actually entails job satisfaction, engagement, and various other aspects which people are actually looking for. So these were some of the reasons we figured related to burnout and to engagement, to why people are leaving. In addition to that, for a lot of employees that are in their mid tenure or their mid career, they are experiencing a sense of stagnation. And which is why, with the market opening up, they want to look for avenues where they can actually grow. Gone are the days where employees would be happy with a steady paycheck and ensuring stability. Uh, Employees are actually looking to see how they can contribute more, play a larger role in the business and at the forefront, and take up more responsibilities as well. So organizations are also focusing on this as part of the proposition, because people are moving to organizations that actually have growth as part of their DNA. And one very important metric that leaders have now started tracking is how many positions do we actually close internally, and how many people are we able to groom internally to take up the mantle of being the next set of leaders. What we've also observed, and this has been very, very prominent in the last 1.5 years, organizations are falling prey to not having enough diversity and inclusion as part of their proposition. Employees want to work for organizations that follow parity, that give opportunity to different segments of people, and where they themselves can truly belong in their individual sense, and and be their best personal self. So this has also become a strategic focus for a lot of organizations today. And organizations, again, that are getting more conscious and having a conscious strategy around it, have seen benefits not just in engagement but also business wise, where they've been able to tap into the potential of a very different segment of people which weren't otherwise the target in terms of their workforce. And lastly, a lot of employees are looking for opportunities to innovate. They don't want to be in a job in some sort of a role where they don't have the option to actually give ideas, try new things, and try different ways of even working. So for all of those that are feeling very, very constricted in uh, in what they're doing, without any opportunity to innovate or try out new things, whether it's another department, whether it's a different project, or something that may just be a passion, that is definitely leading to some of them considering where they are and whether they should explore. But at the crux of all of this is, of course, the market now being very, very open. Uh, every organization going digital and opportunities being available at fingertips. So people who otherwise had to really try hard and look for other jobs would now have their LinkedIn filled with a couple of recruiters approaching them for any sort of opportunities that are available. And even if inherently somebody may not have thought about leaving, they would still consider exploring it. And as a result, then that stretches and then they look to move out. But the market has opened up. So that's, of course, an underlying factor, which is why it has become even more important for organizations to put forward their value proposition very, very well and articulate it in the right fashion, such that we attract the right set of people. One other thing that has happened, and which is why uh, I like to call this the great reset as opposed to the great resignation, because what has happened is there has also been a complete mindset shift at the end of the employees. What has happened is that they've started reevaluating their priorities because they've experienced a pandemic, they've experienced possibly the loss of loved ones and dear friends and family, which is why they are now questioning the why of everything. Why is it that I am doing what I'm doing? What am I gaining out of it? What is the cost? In fact, a conversation we were having with a microfinance organization where they were actually losing a lot of their sales staff from tier two cities. We realized that people actually want to move back to their home, spend time with their family, and they may be okay with not having a very, very high paying job or a very comfortable set of perks. But their priorities have changed and they're assigning more value to their own well-being and spending time with the family. We are observing similar trends across various others where, because of the focus on personal well-being and spending time with family and having not working the entire set of hours but in a very flexible manner, people are also moving to alternate careers, which could be either freelancing or part-time, or one of the trends that's happening in the US is a lot of people getting into stock trading and crypto trading. So that is also something we are experiencing. So what this entails for us as organizations is that there is going to be a reset in what people consider to be their priorities while choosing an organization and while actually also deciding whether to leave or not. They will assign a lot more priority to their personal well-being, their personal aspirations, and also being able to spend time with loved ones. And thus flexibility as a concept is here to stay. It's not with the lockdown being lifted, it's not something that's going to die, because again we see a lot of people leaving because there is lack of flexibility in the working arrangements that are there with the organization. So, like I said, in my view, this is a great reset. And while, of course, there will be a spike where the resignations will be at the highest, but it will move to a model where people are now focusing a lot more on their own personal priorities and their own personal aspirations. And organizations will have to mold their value proposition to cater to some of that. So let's look at the how of it. How do we really try and mitigate this? And I know many of you put in questions saying that how do you compete with some of the salaries that organizations are offering? You know, this is a challenge Especially I hear from a lot of folks in IT, where people are getting offer letters with no less than 30-40%, sometimes even double. And in that case, how do you really try and keep somebody back when there is that temptation? So what we have observed work for some organizations is, of course, try and focus on the aspects apart from the financial bit. Career growth has been one very, very important aspect, because a lot of organizations have stressed on the fact that, especially for people that have been in the system for a while, that as virtue of being there, they will have access to a lot more opportunities, whereas somewhere else they might be starting from scratch or starting with a lesser amount of familiarity. The other thing is that with higher salaries, of course, the expectation at the end of your new employer will be also very, very high. And it will always come with a shelf life. So, how sustainable is that? Because you may get a very good hike in the first time you switch, but what is going to be your year on year growth, and eventually where are you going to be? So while I get that there's a lot of sentiment of employees in some ways becoming mercenaries, but with understanding their motivations and addressing it at the right time, as opposed to trying to take it as just it's all about the money. That is what we've seen help for organizations. So firstly, of course, trying to understand what is it that is driving our set of people to move out. Is it because that there's too much workload? Is it that they're not being able to balance personal priorities? Are there mental health related concerns? So it's very important to understand what people are saying, which is why the number of check-ins, the number of feedback mechanisms have to get a lot more frequent, so that you are able to nip it in the bud. This is especially important for your set of high performers, because what we've seen in a lot of organizations is that by virtue of being high performers, they tend to get all the important projects, all the important work, and as a result of not equitable allocation, you will have your best people burning out. So understanding what the concerns are, setting the right set of expectations is also very important. And this is a challenge that organizations face while hiring. So a lot of times we fall into the idea of trying to paint a very rosy picture about who we are as an organization, and what can somebody expect while being here, which is why we observe that in the first 6 months or maybe 6 months to 1 year, the engagement level is usually high. But after 1 year, it tends to drop very significantly. And that is largely the result of the expectations not being set in the right way, where the employees experience a root shock in some ways, saying that this is not what I was told when I was hired, or this is not the picture I had when I was hired. So a lot of organizations are increasingly moving to a model where at the time of hiring, they're communicating why somebody shouldn't join them or what they shouldn't expect, so that they get the right fitment of people. For example, in some organizations in the professional services space, they say that as a proposition, we will promise you growth, we will promise you transparency, but work-life balance is something as an organization we don't seem to experience that often. So if that is your number one priority, maybe this is the not the right fit. So setting the right expectations is as important as communicating what is good about your organization. Second and most important, given that flexibility has become an expectation almost all employees have today, having the right structure to allow that sort of flexibility, whether it's by way of a hybrid system or by way of defining roles that can operate remotely and need to only come in at when it is critical, because employees seem to be asking the question, and this has come most often when organizations are doing their back to work routine, that if earlier by working remotely results were achieved and business was growing, why is there a need to actually come back to office? So in some cases, it's very important to share the rationale of why it is important and why it cannot be done remotely. And in other cases, wherever that flexibility is available, then that should be there. We've also seen organizations that are trying to monitor the work that is being done by individuals on a day-to-day basis so as to increase efficiency. And this has been a great initiative to actually ensure proper allocation of work and ensuring that we get more out of all of our available resources. But it has also had a downside where people are saying that it feels that we are not being trusted, or we are being monitored or policed in some way. And if on some day I am finishing my work in 3 hours, I know there's another day where I have to work 10 hours. But why do I still need to log in the rest of my hours and be there on the screen? So those are some of the things that we are experiencing as well. So it's very important that we put in the right structure, identify those roles and those teams that can operate remotely, and provide flexibility wherever needed, whether it's for somebody to take time off or log in a little late, leave a little sooner, to manage their personal priorities as well. Thirdly, and this is something we've been talking about, of course, is embedding well-being as part of our proposition. A lot of organizations, unfortunately, are underestimating the impact of mental health and how that is affecting the productivity of the employees and their overall engagement as well. So a lot of organizations, as part of their routine and their day-to-day, have introduced the conversations around well-being. So wherever employees need help, they can reach out, get access to any sort of counseling or other such services. And managers need to be sensitized to ensure that they are identifying this and being very open about it, as opposed to saying, it's okay and you can deal with it and continue performing, etc. What we've also observed is that clearly articulating what is the career roadmap for an individual, especially once they hit that mid tenure, has become very, very crucial. So that clarity sometimes tends to be missing for a lot of people. They don't know what is next for them, what are the various options available, and what do they need to do to actually get there. Along with that, a lot of employees are also wanting to learn new skills, whether it's technologies, whether it's people skills or soft skills. A lot of employees are actually interested in picking that up as part of their own development. And it's up to organizations to actually provide the platform and encourage such behaviors. We've also seen that with some organizations where they have all of this, but people are not picking it up or the usage is not that great. So how are we recognizing some of these behaviors and recognizing the people who actually focus on their development and their learning as well is very, very important. In the new workplace, learning and learning ability is going to be very, very crucial. And the pandemic is proof that things can change anytime. So it's how agile an organization is and how quickly employees can learn, reinvent themselves, and continue growing, of course. What we've also observed is that recognition, and by recognition, I don't mean any sort of monetary perks or anything of that sort, but just timely appreciation, even if it's as simple as a shout out or a pat on the back, or mentioning somebody's name and their contribution in a larger forum. Some of those simple things have actually done the job, because people again are questioning why they're doing what they're doing. And the first thing that comes to their mind after pay is, nobody appreciates what I do. And I'm not getting the right sort of recognition for it. Or in some cases, there's somebody else who is taking away the credit. So how do we look at more forms of recognition in a more frequent manner, and enabling this to happen not just from a superior to a subordinate, but also at the peer-to-peer level, and in a more democratic manner? Because what people need, and there's a lot of research right from Harvard to leading other publications saying that small wins and small appreciations are actually more powerful rather than doing the one thing at the end of the year in a grand fashion. So how can we regularize more recognition and appreciation? And lastly, be more inclusive as an organization. And when we say inclusive, we're not particularly talking about gender, or we're not particularly talking about differently abled or people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. But just as an organization, how do we recognize individuality, and how do we look at various different sort of avenues where people can contribute, and how we can have a much more diverse set of workforce, whether it's from different parts of the country, different backgrounds, different careers as well. So how do we do that as a strategy? And this cannot be a separate agenda. It has to be a part of each and everything that we do. But I think at the core of it all, before we open up for questions, it is trying to address that existential question that people have in their minds right now, where they are reevaluating what they're doing, why they're doing. So if I have to leave you with one thing that I think is the most important in trying to arrest this, is to focus on the why and help employees actually realize what is the why of their role, of their contribution, and of their aspirations. And the minute we can chart the role, the career growth, and the engagement according to address that why, that is when we will be able to mitigate this and try and be ahead of the curve. With that, we would now like to open up for questions from the group. And before I do that, just a quick announcement from our side. As many of you may be aware, we are actually closing our nominations for the best workplaces rankings and the Great Place to Work certification program for this cycle. So in case you are interested in nominating your organization, do go on our website and reach out to us, or you can also directly write into me, and I'll be happy to put you to the right team and take it forward. We'd now like to open this up for questions. So please do feel free to add your questions in the Q&A, and we'll start taking them one by one. All right. The first question that I'd like to take is, with the Great Resignation happening, what's the best way to start succession planning? So thank you to whoever's asked this. This is very, very important. And in fact, with resignations happening at the senior level, this is becoming more and more crucial. The first step really is to identify who is your core talent and potential next in line. And for them, there needs to be a different structure, not just in terms of their engagement, but also in terms of the opportunities available for them. So one of the things that you could ensure is for that these set of people, there is a different sort of a training and a mentoring that's available, which the current set of leaders can actually do. So a separate focus on development conversations and mentoring with the current set of leaders. Secondly, have them work on cross-functional projects, which may be outside their own current scope of work. Here they will get to work with other similar high performers and high potentials. And here you will have the ability to test how they do in such situations and more strategic aspects, which may not be covered in the day-to-day role. And thirdly, one interesting thing we've seen a lot of organizations employ is they create a cross-functional team of these high performers and have them drive the engagement agenda for the organization, where they are responsible for acting on the feedback that employees give by way of surveys. And because this is a representation of the people itself, there has been higher acceptance and much more ideas as well. You can also use this group as a sounding board for any policy decisions or any major changes in the organization. That way, they will feel involved as part of the decision-making process. And at the same time, they will be able to give valuable inputs, which will also help you test their ability to take decisions around these tough areas. All right. The next question is it possible to have a career plan for every employee / person? Because it doesn't look feasible to have a career plan for each position or each person. So I absolutely agree. It's very difficult. And in one of the previous webinars, there was a question saying, who is actually responsible for career growth? Is it the leader? Is it the manager? It's actually the individual. And at the end, you can only take the horse to the water. The horse needs to drink the water himself or herself. So it's not possible to do that for every individual. But what you can do is, for key roles, you can chart out a career path for a larger set of people. So at least that is visible. So you may not have an individual path, in the sense that uh, there's no specific path for me as an individual, but I know if at some point I need to become the head of a certain department, these are the things that I need to achieve. It is going to take this much time, and these are the competencies that I will develop. So that clarity can be established at a team level or at an organization level. But at an individual level, what at max what you can do is, in your performance conversations that managers have with their team members, set aside some developmental goals. These may not be too many, it could be just maybe one or two in a year. But along with the review and the performance parameters, add a component of having a development goal as well, which is tracked along with the performance goals. So while it may not be an individual career path, but it will get the mindset to shift towards development and learning. Is it okay to have a career plan for high pots, but some positions have their limitations for engagement and enrichment? What is your call on this? So I think for some positions, in that case, this is a challenge a lot of organizations are facing, where there's only so many people that you can actually move upwards. So many organizations are moving to a model where they're actually focusing on horizontal growth as a concept. So people are looking at how they can grow people laterally and thus get more experience across the board, as opposed to move up. And it is completely okay to have a differentiated plan for high pots. And that is essential, because the expectations of your high pots will also be higher than the others. So it is very okay to actually have a differentiated plan for them and recognize them as well, because those are the behaviors we want everyone to inculcate within the organization. The next question is, what could be considered as an okay percentage of attrition? So the answer is there's no fixed number. A lot of organizations have a model where they've built in high attrition as part of their business strategy, and it has worked for them very well. Because and an example that I can take is of an organization that's in the hospitality industry. They actually hire people from various different backgrounds which are not otherwise in their work in the workforce. They actually train and upskill them to be a part of the workforce and actually take up jobs. And eventually these people would leave, because even for an increase of 500 to 1000 rupees, it would make a lot of difference to them. But that as a model has worked for them, in the sense that they get extremely committed people, and even when they leave, they're actually evangelists of the organization and the culture. So I would say attrition as a subject, there's no right percentage to have. It completely depends on your business model and how you want to structure that. Even with high attrition, we've seen organizations have a great culture and have high performance, because that's part of their model. All right. So the next question is, how do you initiate trainings organically? Some small companies don't have regular budgets for soft skill courses. So that's a great question, and something a lot of growing organizations today actually keep asking us. So one of the things to do is explore courses that are actually not paid. So there are a whole host of courses on various edtech platforms that are actually available at no cost. Only for somebody, if they want either a certificate or any further sort of training, there is a fee attached. But there are many courses available for free. So organizations, what they do is, the HR team or the L&D team makes a repository of these courses, which are very close to the subject matter of what people do. And that is circulated across for people to take it. The other thing that you can do is, you will have leaders who are actually the role models for the rest of the people. Have them actually anchor these trainings and these soft skill courses, because we've seen in every organization, you will have few leaders that are actually very strong in people skills, and there's a lot to learn from them. So you may not need to invite any external trainers and spend a lot of money, but just enable leaders to showcase themselves and their journey and what they have learned along the way. The next question that I would like to take is, recognition is a good idea and it motivates an individual, but sometimes we witness others who won't get the recognition and gets demotivated. How can that be handled? And please throw some ideas here. So this is absolutely true. We live in a world and in a country where comparisons always keep happening, and we've realized that of course one person being recognized means that the other will not, and thus gets demotivated. When we've decoded this further, there can be two reasons for the demotivation. One is that they feel that the person who got the recognition or the people who get the recognition aren't deserving, and they possibly deserved it as well. So that is one. Or the other is that nobody is clear on the criteria, and thus they say that it's possibly favoritism, or this person is the manager likes this person more, and hence this person keeps getting recognized. There is one solution to this. It's a difficult one, but over time organizations have mastered this and it's working for them really well. It's that you democratize the process of the recognition. So you will have some recognitions which are performance based, which you will be giving once in a year or maybe more frequently. But a lot of organizations have now moved the paradigm of recognition and made it democratic, in the sense that if I have to choose who's been the best team player in my organization, why does it need to be a nomination from the manager or the management? The people together, the team entirely can vote for somebody apart from themselves, and that's the person that can be recognized. In this, what happens is it throws away any question of favoritism or not being involved in the process, or the criteria not being clear. So it completely has been democratized. And the other thing, of course, is help people understand what is it that the ones that are getting recognized, what have they actually achieved and what are those. So a lot of people, while giving a recognition, they actually put down what have been the individual's achievements in that particular time frame in order to get it. And usually a comment from the manager also is mentioned. That can help cut across some of this, because you also don't want the reverse happening where you are recognizing everybody and people are saying that it has no value. So providing the clarity, being transparent, and trying to be as democratic as possible, that is what will actually help. Another question is, how do you create a strong EVP and it has a great impact? So this actually can be another webinar in itself, but if I have to try and attempt to answer it in brief, first is to understand what is your talent archetype, which means what is the background of our set of people, what are their aspirations, what is their skill set, and thus what are their expectations from us as an employer. Once you've understood that, you need to build your proposition entirely around that. So as an organization, we will never recommend that you try and get everything right. It is not possible. Also, what you need to do is understand for your set of people, what are those most important things. For your set of people, is work-life balance important? Is career growth important? Are perks important? Is transparency important for our set of people? And this will be different for organizations. Basis that, you need to formulate what is the proposition or your EVP. And once you've been able to create that, it needs to definitely align with what you stand as a business, and then ensure the right set of communication and cascading around it. So a lot of times when either organizations share their set of values with us or their EVP with us, the first question we ask is, while we understand that the leaders will be aware of this, do all the employees know that this is our value proposition and these are our set of values? And the other question we ask is, how does it impact your day-to-day? Are you doing your recognitions in line with your EVP? Are you doing your performance conversations in line with your EVP? Are you taking decisions and certain times very harsh or strong decisions in line with your EVP. So that's the long and short of it. Try and understand what is your archetype, understand their expectations, build your proposition around it, and ensure that it goes down very, very well, and people understand it and impacts our day-to-day decision making. All right. The next question that I'd like to take up is with every organization mostly having a pyramidal structure where every employee cannot become a leader, what do you think must be the way to retain the employees for a longer tenure? So this is a great question. I answered this in part in one of the earlier points. You should move to a model of horizontal growth and lateral growth as opposed to vertical. And what is important is how you position that horizontal movement or that lateral movement as well. Is it being given the same sort of glamour and the same sort of importance as any vertical movement? That's the question to really ask. And what we have seen is, as a result of a lot more lateral movements, the overall skill set of the individual has moved up, and hence they wanted to stay with the organization for a long time because they see that personal growth as well. The other thing that you can also do, and again, I'm not sure what industry you are in, but in some industries, especially IT, a lot of organizations are now creating two separate career tracks. One is for those that will be people leaders and managers, but at the same time, some that want to focus purely on technology. So they're creating two clear paths of individual contributors and people leaders, and accordingly charting out the roadmap for their employees depending on what they'd like to do further. But this is definitely an issue where you can't move everybody up, which is why I think the focus needs to now move to a horizontal movement as opposed to vertical. How can we retain someone if they are manipulated by competitive organizations? Uh, so this is actually a difficult one to try and address. If by competitive we mean in terms of salaries, what we've seen work is try and have an honest conversation with the employee and try and help them understand what they might be actually getting into. We've seen a lot of cases where people have actually moved out at the temptation of a higher salary, but within a short span of time, they've regretted it and wanted it to come back. So one, of course, as a separate point, organizations have started focusing on building a very strong alumni connect and facilitating a lot of rehiring, because as all of you would be aware, the cost of getting a rehire is getting them up to speed is a lot lesser than a new one. But if you think that they're being manipulated and it's going to work for their disadvantage as a person, I think it's very important to demonstrate that genuine concern and genuine care, and tell them that if it seems too good to be true, it probably is, and they must reevaluate what really is their priority and is it sustainable what they're getting outside or not. We've seen that work in a lot of organizations. In fact, when people are trying to poach, they've been the first ones to raise an alarm internally saying that, hey, this is happening and we should be mindful. All right. I'm just going to scroll through some of the next few questions and take maybe one or two before we close for the day. All right. There's one that says, any idea what is the highest percentage of reason for leaving in India? As we think manager is the reason is the highest, whereas employees won't reveal because they want a smooth exit. So yes, there is the saying that people quit bosses, not jobs. So the manager has a very high influence on the experience of the individual. Not just in the pandemic, but otherwise, one of the reasons we've seen people leave are usually due to aspects around performance, conversations, promotions, or the expectations not being right. And the most classic example that we get is if, let's say, an individual does not get promoted or does not get the increment of their cost and of their choice, and they would go up to the manager asking, why didn't this happen, or why did X person get it? The manager, unfortunately, does not give the right sort of answer or the right sort of feedback, and they would try and dodge that conversation and say that, it's something that HR took a call on. I had recommended the best thing for you. So we've seen some of that happening, and because of that lack of feedback and lack of clarity on what I need to improve on, or what I need to actually do better, people leave. And it's also sometimes not the fault of the managers, because they are maybe not equipped with how to give feedback. So as an organization, our focus should be on how can they be equipped to give feedback properly, and more importantly, how are they taking accountability of driving engagement in their own team. It should be the manager's job, along with the support from HR. But a large segment of managers in some organizations do still think that this is not something that they should be doing. So that is one of the reasons. The other is also that empathy has become very, very important. Wherever people don't have that comfort level or don't see that empathy from the manager, that has also been reason for them to leave that particular organization and leave their particular role. But along with this, at least in the last 1 year, we've also seen burnout as being one of the biggest reasons, and stagnation, especially in mid sort of tenures where they have no clarity on what's going to happen for them, how are they going to grow. So apart from the manager being a concern, burnout and stagnation are two other reasons we see people leaving. What do you think about the contribution of workplace dignity in the overall employee experience? We think it's a very, very important parameter. Dignity in a lot of countries now is actually becoming a fundamental basic principle that any citizen should be entitled to, and the same is extending to organizations. So this also brings about the point that we were talking about earlier on inclusion. So no matter who I am, what my background is, what my sexual orientation is, what my experience is, am I treated with dignity? Am I treated with the right sort of treatment, the right sort of opportunities? That has become very, very important. And especially with the migrant labor crisis that did occur, this was also thrown even more in the forefront. So while corporate India, of course, is a lot ahead in that sense, but I think from an India context, it's very, very important that we look at this segment of the workforce also, because workplace dignity as a concept, I think, is most essential in those segments. I will take one last question before we actually close for today. And I can see that a few of you are leaving, and some questions also. So don't worry, we'll be sharing the presentation that we actually shared earlier, and that will be sent to all of you all on the email IDs that you have registered with. The last question that I will take is, what would be ideas for development for tenured employees 5 years and above in terms of their tenure? So this is a very important question, and that is the pocket we see engagement sometimes dipping to the lowest. The main reason, and if I have to try and point it to a single sort of a factor, is lack of clarity on career growth. That is the most important one. So it's very crucial that they see a visible career path of what they are going to do in the next 5 years, and what are the various roles, what are the various opportunities, and also helping them understand what has been their contribution so far and how has the organization enabled their growth so far. That becomes very, very important. The other thing that I think will work also very well from an engagement standpoint is involving the family of the employee and creating a touch point there. because these are usually people, that have a significant other and possibly children also. So organizations have increasingly started to engage with family members as well, because in a cultural context like ours, the family plays a very important part in our decision making, whether it is our personal life or also where we work and what we do. So these are the two things that I would recommend looking at that. The most important one being career growth, because there is the stagnation that is coming in. With that, we'd like to close the session for today. My apologies in case we've not been able to take any questions, but thank you to all of you for joining in on time and listening intently. We will keep doing these webinars on various different topics. In case you have any suggestions on what you'd like to hear from us more about, do feel free to reach out to us and let us know. We'll be happy to do that. And like I mentioned earlier, in case you'd like to get in touch with us for the Great Place to Work certification and recognition program, do drop in a line or visit our website and we'll be happy to get connected. Thank you so much and hope all of you have a wonderful day and evening ahead. Thank you.